am Cheri Daniels. I am the Director of Library and Archives here at the Sons of the American Revolution SAR Genealogical Research Library, which you can see behind me. This is just an image of what our library looks like right here in downtown Louisville. And if you've never visited with us, stay tuned till the end and I will give you some more information about not only where we're located and how you can come see us in person, but also some of the wonderful online resources that you have access to through our website. Now, we're going to get started today. Our session is using the Draper Manuscript Collection to find your early American lineage. Now, this presentation is one that I've given a couple times on the national level at NGS, I believe FGS, and because the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country is coming up in 2026, this is a really important resource that you need to be aware of. And the reason I'm doing a full presentation on this is because it's a tricky resource to use. There's a lot of moving parts with this, and you need some solid instruction on how to access not only the records on microfilm, but how to find out whether you've got anything in there that would be of value to your research. So let's get started. I'm going to go right into the presentation for you. Okay. Using the Draper Manuscript Collection to find your early American lineage. As I already explained to you who I am, we're going to jump right in. So why is the Draper Manuscript Collection important to your research? If you had any ancestors living in the British colonies prior to the American Revolution, this is a resource you want to pay attention to. Did your ancestors participate in the American Revolution? Once again, this is a collection that you need to have on your radar. Or were your ancestors part of the early migration groups into the West? Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, and that's just a sampling of the states that are actually covered in the Draper Manuscript Collection. Did your ancestors fight in the War of 1812? All of these things would qualify you to make sure you go look at the Draper Manuscript Collection. So why do a lot of researchers avoid this collection? Mainly because a lot of the collection looks like the page you see to the left, and sometimes worse, depending on how faint the copy may be, depending on what the handwriting might look like, it could be a little bit of a mess. And this collection is only available on microfilm. It has not been digitized. There is no place to go and just plug in a name in order to find whether your ancestor's in there. Now, I add a little caveat there. There is one search box that I can tell you about, but it doesn't actually hit a comprehensive index for you. So just keep that in mind. Now, there are a lot of different indexes out there that exist in order to try to help you find ancestors or subjects that you're researching through Draper, but it's not a comprehensive index. There's no one index. There are several indexes, and I'm going to cover why that is and what those look like and where you can find them. One of the things that you might encounter while you're out doing your research are printed works that covers subject, usually of the Revolution. And I'm thinking of, there's one just sitting on my bookshelf next to me is about Kings Mountain. You'll see these kinds of published works, and they will say that they're based on the Draper manuscript. So there are some folks that have done some really extensive research in there, and they've used them. They've pulled out a lot of the main information because there's some amazing recollections or descriptions of battles, of military movements, different events that happened during the Revolution or the War of 1812, different things. And they will pull out, and they have taken this research and then they've published them in wonderful printed text, which is a lot easier to read than the picture that you see over to the left. So sometimes you will see that in your research, and that makes you think that it's all been published and reviewed, but it has not. So this is our gentleman who is responsible for all of this wonderful information. This is Lyman Draper, and he lived from 1815 to 1891. The works and papers that he collected, which form the collection that you'd be using, these were collected by him on the history of the Trans-Allegheny West. At least that was his goal. And this area includes portions of the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama, the entire Ohio Valley, and the Mississippi Valley. And there are nearly 500 volumes in this collection. Lyman Draper had a really significant connection to the State Historical Society of Wisconsin. In fact, he was their corresponding secretary from 1854 to 1886. And they own the original collection. And the University of Wisconsin, I know, is also, I think there's a relationship between the two, and I believe they actually house the originals, but still, it's the State Historical Society under that relationship that is actually the original stewards of the collection. So the time frame that he is covering, and I'm talking about the information he's collecting, that's going to be the 1740s to 1812. Does that mean that that's the limit of the documents or the pieces you're going to see? Not necessarily. This is kind of his focus, and he's after the information that's in that time frame. But he's interviewing people that are way outside of this time frame. So he's going to be interviewing people who lived through that period, or maybe their parent lived through that period, or even grandparent. So he's going to be interviewing people way outside 1812, more like the mid 19th century. He's going to be interviewing people who have connections back to the time period that he's trying to document. So the area covered, 21 states east of the Mississippi, plus Iowa, Missouri, and parts of Canada. The Draper collection consists mostly of interviews and other little snippets of information about this time that he's gathered while he's researching it. But he's also transcribed documents that he discovered along the way, along with 575 early maps. So there's a lot of surprises to be had here in the Draper collection. When he's conducting the interviews, one of the great things that he does is he also tries to glean family information from the interviewee. Because again, he's talking to individuals who participated or their family members. And so he asks them about their lineage as he's conducting the interviews. And these are wonderful. It's almost like, in a way, sometimes some of them have provided transcripts or transcriptions of their family Bible records. Sometimes they're just kind of giving a verbal, this is my parents, these are my grandparents, this is where we came from, this is how we settled, when we settled. That information can be in there. So again, he's trying to get that family information out of the people that he's interviewing. So military records and information are pervasive throughout this collection. And again, his particular strengths here are Revolutionary War and War of 1812, and especially the actions kind of occurring to the West. Now, when we think about the West, at that time, Kentucky was definitely part of the West, Ohio, Indiana, like all of these, Tennessee, all of these areas out here are definitely going to be considered the West. In 2024, we would consider the West way past the Mississippi. But at the time that he was actually collecting this information, we're talking Mississippi Valley, east, and some points west. So again, think about where you are, how you define the West in the mid-19th century. And one little notation I'll give you here is you see that I've got the guide, Indexes Revolutionary War Pension Application Information. I'm going to explain to you what the guide is. That is one of the titles and one way that you can access some of the indexes. But again, it's kind of just showing you that he was very interested in the Revolutionary War period and getting that information out of those he interviewed, and providing as much military information as he possibly could. Other strengths in this collection: Native American conflicts and westward explorations, especially in which the military played a role, such as the Lewis and Clark expedition. One caution that I do have, in the language as Indigenous peoples are described, as African Americans may be described, it's going to be language of the time. So just a caution as you use this, that as with any resource that comes from a time period that is not our own, you are going to encounter things that in present society would not be acceptable. So just a caution as you use this to access information about underrepresented groups of people. Now, only a small part of the collection consists of original documents of the Revolutionary period. Again, the bulk of this is going to be his research notes, correspondence, and handwritten reproductions of things he has encountered along the way. And he then made those reproductions himself. The collection as a whole is extremely varied and includes correspondence, interview notes, extracts from newspapers, sometimes prints from newspapers. I have noticed that. I've noticed a clipping or two that has come through. Sometimes a reproduction of a published source. You might find that as well. So it's not all handwritten, like I was showing you the horrific handwriting that you saw at the beginning. Sometimes he's transcribed some muster rolls and transcripts of official documents. So many things in this collection to explore and unpack. The size of this collection is pretty massive. There's 491 volumes, which is divided into 50 series. Now, I will explore the different series with you here in just a minute, but you want to remember that his series cover letters A through ZZ, minus I and II, and I will explain that in just a second. So again, here is the list of series title volumes. And when I said A through ZZ, let's start with the A's, or should I say the first segment of the alphabet. So here's what this would look like. Each one of the series has their own title, which kind of gives you a clue as to what the contents is going to connect back to. So A, George Bettinger Papers. Now, do I know who that person is? No, I don't. Which is going to reiterate for you that don't discredit something simply because the series title is something you don't recognize. Sometimes it just has to do with the collection, and we may not know how that ties back. Now, like for instance, Boone Papers. Oh, well, we know who Daniel Boone is, but do we know every single person that was connected to Daniel Boone throughout his lifetime and throughout his activity, in Virginia and Kentucky and on his way west into Missouri? Do we know that information? Could our family be in there? Of course, they could be in there. So this is just to give you a list of what these titles look like. You can see George Rogers Clark papers in there. There's 2 volumes for George Rogers Clark. And if we carry on, you see more. There's even something as simple as biographical sketches, historical miscellaneous, memoranda books. So as you can see, we're going all the way to Z. And you notice there was no I. And as soon as you hit Z, it carries on into double letters for the alphabet. And again, we go right on. You see definitely some Revolutionary era titles coming at you. So Kings Mountain. I know Kentucky Papers has a lot of Revolutionary activity in there. There's some pension statements, Sumter Papers, South Carolina and the Revolution, miscellaneous. Now, remember when I said about no I or no II, the reason he did that was he did not want any confusion to be made when you're citing this, so that it didn't look like it was volume 1, volume 2. He did not want them to be confused with any Roman numerals, so that's why he left out the I and the double I. Now that you've seen that series, how would we go about finding something in there that could pertain to our American lineage? Well, accessing the Draper collection, again, this has not been digitized. But the thing is, it has been microfilmed, and there are many libraries throughout the country that have these reels. Now, are you going to find it in your public library? Perchance, depends on the library, depends on where you're located. Depends on the size of the library. If it's a larger library, public library, you might find it. If you can't find it in your area in a public library, contact local university libraries. They may have a copy. Now, if this collection ever gets digitized, and we all pray that it does someday, just keep tabs on the Wisconsin Historical Society, because if it ever does, it will be announced right there at their site. Now, one thing I do want to caution you on, when you go to their website, and it's a wonderful informational site about the Draper collection, they have a little notice there on the website that says order digital copies. Now, that would indicate that this is being digitized, but it's not. What it is a lookup service. And because microfilm can be read and copied digitally through digital microfilm readers, which can then be captured in a PDF, that's basically what they're doing. They're doing lookup services for you. And it says, I believe they will send you like a maximum of, I think it was 15 pages or something like that. And that its staff would only spend 30 minutes looking for what it is you need. So you have to have that source citation. And if you submit to them, they will only spend 30 minutes looking for what it is you're looking for. And they will capture somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15 pages and send that to you, I'm assuming via PDF. So it doesn't mean that the collection is digitized. It means on a case-by-case basis as a lookup, they will do that for you. Now, there is a finding aid for this collection. Now, just a reminder of what a finding aid is. In archive land, a finding aid is a guide to collections. It's not going to tell you everything that's inside, but it is going to give you information on some of the container or file list names that might aid in you discovering what it is you're looking for. Now, this finding aid is through the University of Wisconsin, and this is the URL for you to get there. I will put the link in the description of the video and probably on screen as I edit this. But again, a reminder is a finding aid is a guide. It is not an index. Now, I have to add another caution to this. There are a few indexes in this finding aid that they have incorporated, and they've pulled that from the guide, which I will tell you what the guide is here in just a minute. It is just one way that you can take a look at indexes for this collection. So again, the finding aid is not designed to be an index. Depending on which series you click on in the finding aid, you might find an index in there, but it's actually coming from the guide to the Draper collection, which is a published work. So this is what the finding aid looks like from the Wisconsin Historical Society, but it is provided through the University of Wisconsin. This is what I call, if you can see there's the outline view. That is, and then this is the summary information of this collection. Just gives you some overall information about it. And it is basically tied to the original. So you're going to see that it doesn't tell you how many reels of microfilm that there are. It tells you in cubic feet, 97.2 cubic feet. That's an archival term. So they're talking now, at the end of that sentence, you see it says 123 reels of microfilm. So again, this is taking it from the archive view and then telling you that it is also available in microfilm. But this is how big the collection is, 97.2 cubic feet, if you went to look at the originals. Now, down that left-hand menu, I did click on, here's something to show you. So Draper Manuscripts Finding Aid links to the left there. If you click on that, you see the series titles that I just showed you earlier. But if you happen to click on, if you notice they are a different color, and so that means they are clickable links. And I just clicked on the William Preston papers as an experiment. Now, the William Preston papers is one that actually includes some volume indexes in there. Again, coming from the guide. Now, not every one of them that you saw in there if you clicked on it, would give you an index, unfortunately. But it reminds you that it's a really great resource to, especially this winter, go play around with the finding aid and see what kind of indexes are in there that you can access if you go down that series, the series title list, and see if you get some. So here's just kind of a container description for volume 3. Now, if you realize what I just showed you, that's QQ. So let's go back. So this is Draper. The Preston Papers is QQ. Okay. And when I saw this right here, QQ, volume 3, there's indexes, all of this. So I clicked on 3, which is the contents list. That gives you this kind of container overview of what's in there for volume 3 of QQ. Now, what I don't super love about this is it doesn't really kind of give you the address of what it is you're looking for. A lot of times when you're looking at indexes or calendar series publications for Draper, you will see a series, and it's kind of an address for where things live. And it's usually a number, then letters, then another number. So you see the 3 and the QQ. What would you need after that would be the page number. So I will show you what the address specifically usually looks like when you see one. But again, this just gives you, though, it does, at least as you're playing with this, as you're exploring each one of the series, this gives you an overview of what's in there. Just tiny, is this revolutionary related? Is this War of 1812 related? It kind of gives you just a broad bird's eye view of what might be in these series. But again, not an index per se. This is what the index would look. This was what the index looked like for the William Preston. Remember, we had volume 3, and then now you see pages, and it just says there's some people. It just gives you correspondence and the date of, and there's some notes, but it does not really give you every single name that's in the specific page that you're looking at. I can tell you that right now. I've looked for some of this stuff, and I can tell you it's not comprehensive. But this is as good as you're going to get playing in the finding aid. And again, this index is taken from the guide to the Draper manuscripts. So again, play with that site. Have fun with it. It's something that you can do for free from home right now to just get an idea about the Draper manuscripts and what you might be able to find in there. So typical library collection, again, microfilm, reels, depending on where you get it from. Some, I know that University of Wisconsin's at 123 reels. Some of us have more than that. It depends on when they were purchased and who the distributor was. So 133 reels for roughly 500 volumes. And yes, it usually does. The collection usually has all volumes in them. The Guide to Draper Manuscripts by Josephine L. Harper. This is one that most people will cite as saying, oh, this is the comprehensive index. It is not comprehensive. It is probably one of the most helpful guides, and it does have indexes inside, but it has 3 indexes inside of it, which you have to pay attention to. And again, it is still not comprehensive. The Print Calendar Series guides, 6 volumes. These are literally just 6 of the series that were arbitrarily taken out. I know there's the Kentucky paper, there's the George papers, there's the George Rogers Clark papers. I believe Frontier Wars is one of the volumes, and so it's random 6. So the Print Calendar Series guide is 6 volumes. Taken with the Guide to Draper Manuscripts, my advice to find anything is that you have to search the indexes of all of them. This is your best chance to find if you've got someone in there. You have to check the index of each calendar series guide. So all 6 volumes, each volume has its own index. Check each index. Check the 3 indexes in the Draper Manuscripts, in the Guide to Draper Manuscripts by Josephine Harper. And then I'm going to tell you there are some other print copies of series, Boone, Henderson, different things out there, and each one of them can have an index out there if you run across it. And again, one thing I mentioned earlier was published collective histories like Kings Mountain and things like that. Those would also have indexes in them. So again, it's a little bit of detective work to do this, but so again, the indexes are key. Here's a quick look at the guide to Draper manuscripts. As you can see, it's broken down into different subjects, and each one of those contains its own index. There's general, revolutionary pensions, and additional personal data, and you want to make sure that you scroll through each index to make sure that you are looking for that you have a good chance of finding your ancestor. The calendar series guides. Each one of those have indexes in the back. Like I said, each one, and even if you don't think that it's going to apply to your ancestor, please look at the index of each one, because our ancestors moved around a lot more than we like to give them credit for. And even just family connections, subject connections, location connections can be in these indexes. And like I would advise, looking for different things. If you don't see a name that you're looking for, look for location, look for different subjects. You can find some really great things in these. Some folks have suggested Googling a surname with Draper Manuscripts to see if someone has located something during their research that might help with your research, that might identify one of your ancestors. And it has happened. That is, one of those things. People have taken deep dives in there. They've been researching their ancestors. And even though the ancestor may not appear in the general indexes that we've been talking about, they may have pulled out some information and published it up online. They could have transcribed it, especially when there's a really good story. Some of them, they found them early and they have repeated those throughout the internet. And so that's always a really good tip. Now, this is something that I cannot take credit for, and I'm posting this for a moment just to show you the complicated method involved with finding someone in Draper manuscripts. This is from the St. Louis County Public Library. And the first sections that you see to the left, this is a flowchart on how they would recommend you finding someone in the Draper Manuscript Collection. So as you can see, the very first step is the name of an individual. Look in the name indexes plural, remember there's 3, in the guide to the Draper Manuscripts. Did you find it? No. Search in the calendar series. They didn't say it, but they mean all 6 volumes, all indexes in those volumes. Did you find it? No. Search the transcriptions. So once you get to a no and you migrate to the right section, they are giving you advice that can sometimes be, or I guess in their case, it is tied to other indexes they have there in the library. And I will tell you that depending on the location, especially if a location or the library is tied to a location in Draper, sometimes they'll have their own indexes that local volunteers have went through and done. So based on where it is you're accessing the Draper collection, there might be other indexes there in the library. So ask your library staff if they have any other indexes beyond the calendar series and the guide to Draper manuscripts. I'm just showing you this to just to point out that it's not straightforward finding things for inside the Draper manuscript collection. In fact, here's some examples. They've got printed index, indexes and documentaries. They also have Google the name and Draper manuscripts to look for a citation. Is it cited? Sometimes they're not cited. Sometimes the story is repeated. It says it comes from Draper, but the source citation may not be there. And then this is old enough to say they're even telling you to look at RootsWeb for some of the citations. Let's see, and then read the descriptions of all the volumes and guide to Draper. That is actually a good suggestion, to take a look at all the different descriptions for them, just to see if there's anything that might alert you to the subject material that you are looking for. All right, remember I talked about the address if you find a citation that you want to look up. if you find an address on a microfilm reel that corresponds to a person that you want to read about, this is what that's going to look like. You see the 17 is going to be the volume number. CC is going to be your series. And then the last numbers are going to be the page numbers. So this is series CC, volume 17, page 55 through 56. Okay. If you're going to cite Draper as a source, this is just a scholarly citation. This is not EE. This is not evidence explained. They're on the next slide. I'm just showing you, these are some of the examples. Again, in genealogy, you pick which one that you want to use. Sometimes people will use more of the historical citation formats. And so just FYI, this is, again, they are, as you can see in the citation, they're using the item, date, Draper collection, volume, series, and page. Note that there are different editions of the microfilm, that there's a 1949 versus a 1970s version. That's just important to note in your citation when you are including the publication date. Just make a note of which edition you are actually using. And then there's also evidence explained. This is what that would look like according to Elizabeth Shown Mills. And again, item, date, series, volume, page, and Draper collection at the end there. All right, so remember I was telling about the calendar series. So this is what the entries look like in the calendar series books. So you go to the index, you find someone, person's name that you want to know more about, you turn to the page number that it gives you, and then you have to look through that page, see if you can find that person, because you're going to see multiple entries that look just like this. See the 32CC94, and basically it's going to give you little abstracts with that person's name in it. So it's not going to give you the transcribed pages from Draper. It's going to give you little abstract entries in there that you can learn about the contents and see if that's something that you want to go look up and research a little bit more. So in this case, Christopher Columbus Graham, Louisville, Kentucky, letter to Lyman C. Draper, acknowledges letter and book sent to the Crab Orchard, has lived in Louisville 2 years, was born in Indian Fort in 1787. Here's another one. 17CC, 26 to 27, John Shane, interview with Benjamin Jones of Georgetown, Kentucky, born in 1799, son of James and Rachel Bell Jones. His father and uncle, James Bell, were spies, location of Cobb Station, Samuel Spence killed by Indians. Now, again, these are just abstracts. So once you go to page 26 to 27, he's going to outline all the information that's contained in here. You'll get a lot more detail, a lot more names, a lot more people will be mentioned if you go to the pages in the Draper collection on the reels of microfilm. So this is your trail to the microfilm. Here's another one. I'm using a lot of Kentucky examples just because Draper is really important to Kentucky, but this is just one example. Like I said, there are multiple states that are contained within the collection. So this is just one example. Again, this one's William Brown, September 5th, 1818. A letter to Adam Beatty near Washington, Mason County, the advisability of Beatty's becoming a candidate for United States Senate. Thinks William Hall would support him. So this is literally a letter that's been transcribed from William Brown, who was, by the way, a congressman, 1818, Cynthiana. Ironically, that was the year that his house was built. We tried to save it, and unfortunately, it was torn down exactly 200 years later, unfortunately. But anyway, it's nice to have another letter from this individual. Okay, so now we're going to cover an entry example that covers one of my family traditions that has been long-standing for one of my branches. And while Draper didn't fully break through this brick wall, it gave me a wealth of information that contained a lot of clues that I can take and hopefully research further in order to break through. The story for us begins in a different collection called the E.E. Barton Papers. Now, the E.E. Barton Papers is another collection that I believe Draper was this man's inspiration. E. Barton was an attorney in Falmouth, Kentucky, which is in Pendleton County, up along the Ohio River. And he followed the same pattern of Mr. Draper, only he did so in the 1930s and 40s. Now, the rumor about Mr. Barton is that as an attorney, he would not take a client until they filled out a family group sheet so that he could learn who was related to whom. He knew that was important in a small community like that, and he wanted to make sure that things were being represented appropriately, and he didn't have a lot of conflicts of interest going on. So he did the same thing. He interviewed people throughout his county, and the thing about the E. Barton papers is it's very similar to Draper in that it does touch a lot of families and their migration in and out. And it touches multiple counties, it touches multiple states, and it is really an amazing collection. If you have any whiff that your family was in any way settled in Southern Ohio, Northern Kentucky, oh my goodness, get to the Barton papers. And I will put a link into where you can access some of those. I believe you have to access those through the Pendleton County Historical and Genealogical Society. But I will provide more information about that. But the E. Barton papers, again, remember, 1930s and 40s. There was a family source listed, basically taken off of an interview, stated that Grandfather Cox was born at the fort and that his father was killed by the Indians. Another report in another interview, because this guy interviewed multiple people, stated that someone saved him from being killed by the Indians. Lewis County history listed an Elizabeth Cox remarrying, and that her previous husband, Elijah Cox, was killed by the Indians. So we've got all of these stories came out of the E. Barton papers about my branch of the Cox family. Was there any truth to any of this? And really, which parts are true? Because essentially what's happening is it's a really mixed up telephone game. And there's not a lot of detail that tells me, I mean, when it says born at the fort, what fort? Where are we talking? I know this family, I think, traveled down through Pennsylvania. There are a lot of forts in between. A lot of forts in Kentucky. There's Cincinnati was a fort. All of these different things. There's a lot of forts in the area. Killed by the Indians. That's another ambiguous thing. We don't know where. I do know that this family did settle in Lewis County and then migrated over to Pendleton County. So is there any truth to this story? And perhaps more clues can be found in the Draper collection. And when I started looking in the indexes, there were two separate entries found in 2 volumes of the calendar series about the Cox family. And each entry said it was a Cox family who was attacked by the Indians while traveling down the Ohio. This is just an example of what that looks like once I took the address and went to the microfilm reel. This is an interview done, William Chenoweth and the Coxes. And it says the substance of the following narrative was given me by Judge Scott in 1851. It says, in the spring of 1786, William Chenoweth, a brother of my mother's, so we're getting some family information here, a brother of my mother's, left his friends on the most distinguished adventures from beyond the mountains, were likely entertained. Late in the winter of 1787, or after the opening of navigation in the Ohio, 3 of the brothers of Mr. Cox, with their families, some Negroes, together with William Chenoweth, descended the river in flatboats, intending to locate in Kentucky. The river was high, it being early in March. The boats were lashed together for greater security, the weather being cool. The immigrants were robed accordingly to its requirements. Now, a side note is that in my family history, or I should say family traditions, we have a couple of different things that were passed down, little heirlooms, artifacts. My great grandmother told me that one little piece, it's like an egg holder, that it came down on a flatboat, and then I have an iron kettle that she says came through the mountains. So we have things that are tied to the migration, and one of them's coming down a flatboat, which was a huge way that people got into the Ohio and Kentucky areas, of course. And so this totally tracks with what we know about the migration patterns at the time. And of course, 1787, the war is over by then, but everybody's expanding, everybody's moving west. And so then it talks about, how they reached a point above the mouth near the Great Kanawha. Now, this is over in Pennsylvania. So we're talking about south of Pittsburgh. That's where this is. We're getting a little bit farther east. And so it's giving me a little bit more of a location, which is really exciting, giving me more details. So then as they struck beach, okay, so the location that it's giving me is, it says about 9 miles above the mouth of the Great Kanawha. It was agreed that 2 of the Coxes and Chenoweth should go on shore and hunt along the bottom till they should arrive at the north of that river. A Negro man belonging to one of the property was detailed to land them from a canoe on the Virginia side and then return with dispatch to the boats. So they're giving me more of a location, which is really great. Literally, it's kind of very detailed there, that 9 miles. And then you got, because that's up in, think about the Pittsburgh area, Pennsylvania and Virginia, where all of that overlaps. So that's giving me the right direction. That's very interesting. So the rest of this actually details basically an attack from Indians along the shore. It talks about who dies, who survives. In fact, they were instantly attacked. And it does say that the Negro man received a bullet when about 20 yards from the shore, which had instantly killed him. Now, as you notice, he's described as a Negro man. Stay tuned about that. This account does not name who he is. You do have some other names here that are mentioned, but of course, it's a very violent story. And in this moment, they're talking about, that some of them survive, some of them made it back. Here's where they actually get back to the boats, and which they were joyfully received. It says, although -2 of the party, Cox and the Negro. So one of the Cox men we know were killed, and the Negro man. Now, this is also in the Draper Manuscripts. This is, as you can see, this is an excerpt from some printed source that he has found. And it says, trip down the Ohio River. The following sketch, kindly furnished by Mr. Marvin B. Christ, is as dictated to him in 1863. Now, if you remember, the previous account was dictated in 1851 by Judge Scott. This is by his grandfather, Joseph Liston, son of Edmund and Elizabeth Kester Liston. Edmund Liston and family immigrated from Maryland to Kentucky, 1786. They traveled overland to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Remember the Pittsburgh area? This is where the river that they were talking about in the previous account mentioned, where they took water on a flatboat in company with another boat belonging to 2 brothers by the name of Cox, who were immigrating to the same locality. There were 10 men in the party, 5 to each boat. During the voyage down the river, Edmund Liston concluded to go ashore and procure game, and a Negro called Gabe. We have Gabe's name here. And in the previous account, it just said a Negro man, and we didn't know whether that was an enslaved man or a free man. And we still don't know this at this point. But we do have his name, which I think is extremely valuable information. And the rest of this account basically tells them, it gives the same story. I won't show you the rest, but it gives the same story, basically, that a Cox man and Gabe were both killed in this incident. Now, here is a third account of the same story in Draper, which is why I'm telling you, you have to search all of the indexes, because you never know what you're going to find. This third entry comes to us from 1860. It says volume 8, trip 1860. I'm not quite sure where that's all coming from. However, interestingly enough, at the top of this one, it gives us a slightly different location. It talks about the day we left Limestone. Limestone is typically attributed to Maysville, Kentucky. That was their original area. So I'm not quite sure exactly what this is. It may have been that they left trying to get to Limestone, because that was actually a common location of arrival. And so maybe they were trying to get to Limestone. So I have to consider what this means, or I have to go research and see if there's another limestone further up the river. So then basically what it says is that we've got the same man. We have William Chenoweth again, which we saw in the very first entry. William Chenoweth, but this time it names the Cox men, Joe and Ben Cox. And then it says Ben Cox's Negro. So now we know that Gabe was an enslaved man. So it puts that story in context about them making Gabe row them to the shore and the attack that followed suit. And this gives even more detail about what they thought they heard. So the experience of them coming to shore, what signs were they getting that this might not have been a great place to go ashore to hunt? Basically, it was an ambush, and they killed, it says, they killed Joe Cox and then wounded Ben Cox, and they killed Ben Cox's Negro. So with it, we know that they killed Gabe. This one gets a little bit more gruesome about the location of where a bullet went in. And then it talks about they saw Joe Cox's body laying there on the shore with his arms spread and his head scalped as we came up. We didn't venture to land to bury them, but told some soldiers we met a little piece above in a boat going down and suppose they did. So they're hoping that these men were eventually buried by soldiers, but we don't know that information. So the really interesting part about this final entry or this final description or version of the events is that it then goes into description of where each of the surviving men later settled. So Ben Cox afterward lived up by Bairdstown. Peter Cox was killed out back. It says out back of Cincinnati. So we'll have to envision what that actually means. David Cox in the upper part of the state of Ohio above Wheeling. George, this goes into more people, George McCoy and Peggy, Cox, who was. So we know that there was a Peggy Cox who married a George McCoy. It says his wife were also killed up there. So again, another incident that I could potentially go research to find out more about all of these people. Now, this account then even gives me more locations. Some of the branches here with the McCoy, because apparently the Cox married into the McCoy family. We've got below Beaver, Pennsylvania, the waters of Short Creek. And then, and it describes how this family met their demise, basically. Again, so a whole nother layer of details in the third entry. This is just a kind of a complicated example of what Draper can actually pull out for you. And one of the things I will tell you, this is why I say that the index is not fully comprehensive. All the indexes that you look at are not fully comprehensive. I've checked every single one of them for the name Gabe to see if I could find any just a Negro man named Gabe as they describe him. And nope, not in any of the indexes. I couldn't find Peggy Cox in there as well. So it's selective as far as what gets put in the indexes. And so just look for those family heads of household. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of underrepresented groups in this collection. You will find things about Native Americans. You will find things about African Americans, about women. They are in here. It's just sometimes you have to be a little creative about the location, the event, however you're researching this, and the path it's going to get you to a person that you're researching. Yes, you can look for names, but look for more of the heads of household surnames that you are searching for. If you know already going in some of those family units you're looking for, play detective, pull out some of those details that might actually be indexed in these. But again, this is the main point really for Draper, for me, why this is so valuable, is that Draper understood that as people migrated west, there was no entity, there was no authority in this area that was going to officially record the history of the people who fought in the Revolution, the people who fought in the War of 1812, the people who settled the frontier. Their histories were not being recorded. They were being lost. And Draper took it upon himself to attempt to record as much as he could in his lifetime and just collect it together into one resource. And while I really do wish they would comprehensively digitize it, even in a messy form, I don't care. AI maybe coming down the road might be able to take this and really, really take that handwriting and be able to give us something that's searchable. But there are so many little pieces of information about the activities of the wars, the settlement period, and all the different families that were associated and the connections they had among each other. So it's an invaluable resource. I believe as we go towards the 250th that we absolutely have to look. We have to keep the Draper manuscripts as something that we suggest to researchers on a regular basis. Again, it's tricky, but it's usually very worth it. So that's all I have about the Draper Manuscripts collection. And like I said, there's 133 reels for you to explore. If you have any further questions, there's my email address. Just send out a question and I will see if we can't help you. Yes, we do have the full 133 reels here at the SAR library. So if you are in town, in the Louisville area, this is where we're located. Our hours were open Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 4:30, every third Saturday of the month, 9 to 4. And look for some bonus Saturdays during SAR leadership when they are in town, because this is our national headquarters. The leadership comes into town twice a year. And when they are in town, we usually are open one extra Saturday there. So be looking at our calendar for that. For SAR members, DAR members, CAR members, SR members, that's Sons of Revolution, and our Friends of the Library program members, it's free admission. For everyone else, it's $5 per day. So once again, this is a national library, and we collect all 50 states and all periods of U.S. history. So again, we're a wonderful genealogy resource right here in the Ohio Valley Tri-State region. And just to help you guys visually pinpoint where we are directly across the street from the Louisville Slugger Museum. So if you see this big giant bat when you're driving down the streets in Louisville, just remember we are right across the street from there. In fact, this is what you would see. Those two large buildings are both the national headquarters, but where my yellow arrow is, that is the library itself. Look for that little red door there. It looks really tiny, but as you can see from the image behind me, it's really large. It goes all the way back to the next street. And so we have a lot of over 55,000 volumes here in our collection, plus an archive. So there's a lot to explore. So as I said, print collection, over 55,000 volumes, which includes 10,000 family histories. We have surname files. And our collection range does cover all U.S. states and from the colonial to present day. We have several databases available to visitors while they're here on site. We're a Family Search Affiliate Library, Ancestry, Fold 3, Newspaper Archive, American Ancestors, Accessible Archives, Gale, U.S. History. We have the Craig Special Collections Room, which houses the George Washington Collection, George Rogers Clark Collection, and of course we also do have the Draper Manuscript here. We have a digital microfilm reader, so once you do pull up something in the Draper manuscript, you can capture that information digitally via PDF instead of just printing that out. We also have a brand new preservation station that is ready for folks who want to preserve their own family heirlooms or family materials physically through archival materials. Plus, we also have scanners available if you want to digitize those. Flash drives are available for purchase for scanner, copier, and microfilm reader access. We have free Wi-Fi. And like I said, the SAR Genealogical Research Library is a Family Search Affiliate Library, which gives you access to over 500 million record images that you cannot access from home. Please be sure to check out our website at library.sar.org. because we have our events tab up there, which is different from the main website. So you want to go to our library events. We have all different kinds of resource material in here. We have our wish list. We have different programs and series that are happening that you want to make sure that you are keeping watch for. And of course, if you miss any of our programs, we record a lot of them. And so we have our own playlist on the main SAR YouTube channel, which is at National Society SAR. That's how you get to our YouTube channel. Look for the library playlist. It's called Library American Lineage playlist and subscribe to that so you can go down the list and watch what it is that you have missed over the past several months. Lastly, if you'd like to have more information about what's going on here in the library, new materials that come available and all of that, just subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out roughly 3 to 4 times a year. And that is all I have. Please be sure to like and subscribe just so that you don't miss out on any of our material coming out in the future. Thank you all.